Have you ever listened to a song and just gotten chills? Wondered what exactly gives it that emotional punch, that perfect mix of notes that just feels right? Well, it's not some kind of magic. It's more like a code, and today we're going to crack it. So here's the big question, right? What is the secret behind those chord progressions that just give you goosebumps, while others are totally forgettable? It's definitely not random. There's a system, a kind of musical grammar, and once you get it, it unlocks a whole new world of sound.
And believe it or not, this whole thing kicks off with something super simple, a basic recipe that only needs 3 notes. This is the absolute core, the foundation of pretty much all the harmony you hear in Western music.
And that 3-note recipe, it's called a triad. Pretty straightforward name, right? It's a chord made of 3 notes. You can think of it like a primary color in painting. It's the simple, basic thing that we can then mix and tweak to create every single shade of musical emotion.
All right, so let's start right at the beginning and take a look at this fundamental building block. Getting this is kind of like understanding the actual DNA of harmony itself.
So how do we actually build one of these things? This little chart shows you the exact recipe. It's all about intervals, the distance between the notes. For a bright, happy-sounding major triad, you start with your root note. From that note, you count up 4 semitones. That's just 4 keys on a piano or 4 frets on a guitar. And bam, that's your major third. Then go back to the root and count up 7 semitones to find the perfect fifth. So, root plus 4 plus 7. That's the formula for happy.
Okay, but what happens if we start messing with that recipe just a little bit? You'll see that by changing the distance of just one of those notes, we can create 4 totally different flavors of triads. And each one has its own unique emotional vibe.
First up, the one we just met, the major triad. With that classic root, major third, and perfect fifth combo, it sounds bright, totally stable, and just plain happy. This is the sound of pop songs, of big, triumphant movie scores. Whenever you see a chord chart with just a single letter like C, G, or D, yep, it's talking about a major triad.
Now, check this out. If we take that major third and we just lower it by one single semitone, it becomes a minor third. That one tiny change, 1 fret on a guitar, transforms our happy major triad into a minor triad. And suddenly, it sounds darker, kind of thoughtful, and often, sad. All that from moving one little note?
Okay, now things get a little spicier. Let's look at the recipe. We're keeping that minor third from the last chord, but now we're also messing with the fifth. We flatten the perfect fifth by 1 semitone, which creates a diminished fifth. This combo makes a diminished triad, and this chord is pure tension. It feels shaky, unstable, like the music in a horror movie right before something jumps out.
And for our last flavor, we go back to the happy major third, but this time we raise the perfect fifth by 1 semitone. This makes an augmented fifth. The result is an augmented triad. It sounds weird, mysterious, kind of dreamy and unsettling, like you're floating and you have no idea where you're going to land. So we've got our 4 basic flavors. But what if we keep the exact same ingredients, the same 3 notes, but just change the order we stack them in? That's where inversions come in. They let us create a completely different texture from the exact same chord.
So an inversion is really just a triad where the main root note isn't the lowest sounding note anymore. And here's a super important point. We need to separate the idea of the root, which is like the chord's identity, from the bass, which is just whatever note happens to be on the bottom at that moment.
Making an inversion is actually pretty simple. Just look at this C major triad, C, E, G. The C is the root, and it's also the lowest note, the bass. To make the first inversion, we just take that C from the bottom and pop it on the top, an octave higher. So now E is the new bass note. It's the same 3 notes, C, E, and G, but now they're stacked E, G, C. It's the same chord, but it feels a little different, right? A little less grounded, maybe more in motion.
But why even bother with this? Well, it's not just about getting a different sound, it's also super practical. This is the secret to getting those really smooth, flowing chord changes. Instead of having to jump your hand way up the neck of a guitar, for example, inversions let you find the notes for the next chord right where you are. The notes just have to move a fret or 2. It's so much cleaner.
So once you've got a handle on triads and how to flip them around with inversions, you can start, coloring outside the lines. This is where songwriting gets really fun. We can start borrowing chords from other keys and adding new, more complex layers to our basic recipes.
This here is a really powerful technique called borrowing. On the left, you've got a standard, pretty happy-sounding chord progression in the key of C major. Pretty common. But now look at what happens on the right. We borrow 2 chords from the key of C minor, G minor, and F minor. And whoa, suddenly the progression has this gorgeous, kind of sad, beautiful depth to it. This is the secret sauce behind songs like Creep by Radiohead and a ton of Coldplay stuff.
And honestly, you shouldn't be afraid to just play around with this. The best way to really get it is to just try it. Take a simple progression you already know and start swapping in some of these borrowed chords. It's kind of mind-blowing what you can come up with. It's a lot of fun.
And that whole idea of experimenting leads us right to our next concept. What if you want even more flavor, more complexity? Well, you can just keep stacking thirds on top of your basic triad. This creates what we call extended chords. By adding a fourth note, a seventh, or hey, even a fifth note, a ninth, we can unlock some incredibly rich and colorful sounds.
Yeah, just think of these extra notes as spices. A lot of the time you can just swap out a plain old major chord for something a little more interesting. Like a major seventh chord can make that same chord sound really open and airy, almost jazzy. A dominant seventh, that's the sound of the blues, adds this gritty tension that just pulls your ear towards whatever chord is coming next. And an add ninth chord, that can add this beautiful, shimmering, almost ethereal color.
So we've gone through a lot of theory here. And that brings us to this classic debate that musicians always have. How important is all this theory really? Is it better to learn all the rules, or should you just play what sounds good to you?
Well, one point of view, which you see all the time online, is that the best way to learn is just by doing it. Don't get stuck at a textbook. If you want to use cool chords, just learn to play songs that already use those cool chords. Your ear and your fingers will teach you everything you need to know in a real musical way.
But of course, there's a strong counter-argument to that. The idea is that if you're only copying what other people have done, you might be limiting yourself. Understanding the theory, the why behind what you're hearing, gives you a map. It lets you understand the techniques so you can use them on purpose to create your own unique sounds, not just rehash what's already been done.
But really, in the end, it's not a competition. The most powerful way to think about it isn't theory versus feel, it's theory and feel. You use the knowledge to understand the map, to see all the different roads you could possibly take, but then you use your ear, your feel, to decide which of those roads is the right one for your song.
So look at it this way. Music theory gives you the ingredients, but your creativity, your ear, your own voice, that is what writes the recipe. The theory gives you the tools, but you are the artist. So the only real question left is, what are you going to create? Thanks for joining us.